that I'm running to be the president of a great country.
Something interesting is happening inside Kenya's opposition politics, and it is receiving far less attention than it deserves. For years, many people assumed that if the opposition won the next election, Kalonzo Musyoka would finally have his opportunity to run for president with the full backing of his allies. But politics rarely follows old assumptions. As Edwin Sifuna and the Linda Mwananchi team continue attracting crowds, dominating political conversations, and expanding their influence beyond their traditional strongholds, one uncomfortable question is beginning to emerge. Has Kalonzo's long-awaited presidential dream quietly started slipping away, not because of President William Ruto, but because of changing power dynamics within the opposition political camp? Let's examine the facts, the strategy, and what this could mean for 2027. Kenyan politics has always rewarded politicians who can demonstrate momentum. Political parties rarely unite behind the leader who has waited the longest. Instead, they rally behind whoever appears capable of winning. That has happened several times in Kenya's history. Before the 2002 elections, political calculations shifted rapidly around Mwai Kibaki after it became clear he had become the strongest opposition figure. Before 2022, William Ruto steadily built national momentum through early campaigns, making it difficult for alternative candidates within Kenya Kwanza to emerge. The lesson has remained the same. Politics rewards visible strength. Today, something similar appears to be unfolding within the united opposition. While Kalonzo Musyoka remains one of the coalition's senior leaders, public attention increasingly revolves around another group, the Linda Mwananchi team. Among its most recognizable faces is Nairobi Senator Edwin Sifuna. Although Sifuna has not publicly declared presidential ambitions, his political influence has expanded remarkably over a relatively short period. His speeches dominate social media discussions. His rallies receive national attention. His criticisms of government often shape news headlines. Most importantly, he increasingly speaks beyond ODM supporters and appeals to many young opposition supporters across different regions. That changing perception matters, because in politics, perception often becomes political capital. Why Sifuna's rise creates a problem for Kalonzo. At first glance, Sifuna's popularity should benefit the entire opposition. A stronger opposition should improve everyone's chances. But coalition politics is rarely that straightforward. As one politician becomes more influential, the balance of power inside the coalition naturally begins to change. People begin asking difficult questions. Who is energizing supporters? Who attracts media attention? Who sets the political agenda? Who can mobilize young voters? Increasingly, many observers believe Sifuna is answering several of those questions. That does not automatically make him the next presidential candidate, but it changes internal calculations. Political parties eventually invest where they see growing returns. This brings us to Kalonzo Musyoka himself. Few politicians in Kenya possess his level of experience. He has served as Foreign Affairs Minister. He has served as Vice President. He has remained relevant across multiple political eras. Yet despite all that experience, many Kenyans still struggle to imagine him as president. Why? Several reasons often emerge in public discussions. First, Kalonzo has spent much of his political career as a coalition partner rather than the central political force. He supported Raila Odinga in several elections.
Wiper Party leader Kalonzo Musyoka has officially rejoined the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition Party and dropped his presidential bid in the August 9th general election in favor of Raila Odinga.
He has repeatedly accepted the role of deputy instead of leading from the front. While that earned him a reputation as a reliable negotiator, it also created another perception, that he is more comfortable supporting someone else's campaign than building his own winning movement. Politics rewards confidence. Unfortunately, public perception sometimes mistakes patience for lack of ambition. Second, critics argue that Kalonzo rarely defines the national political conversation. When major political debates emerge, louder voices often dominate. Whether it is Rigathi Gachagua, Edwin Sifuna, or even government leaders, Kalonzo sometimes appears reactive instead of setting the agenda himself. Modern politics is fought daily across television, online platforms, and public rallies. Remaining quiet may project maturity, but it can also create the impression that someone lacks political energy. Third, Kalonzo has struggled to expand his political identity beyond his traditional support base. Every presidential candidate eventually faces one unavoidable challenge. Can they convince communities outside their political home to trust them? That remains one of Kalonzo's biggest unanswered questions. Of course, perception is not always reality. Some supporters view Kalonzo differently. They describe him as experienced, measured, and less confrontational than many Kenyan politicians. They believe Kenya needs calm leadership instead of constant political drama. Others strongly disagree. Among sections of younger voters, Kalonzo is sometimes viewed as representing an older generation of politics. Some critics argue he appears overly cautious. Others believe he waits too long before making decisive political moves. Fair or unfair, such perceptions influence elections. People rarely vote only on qualifications. They vote on confidence. They vote on momentum. They vote on emotion. Now compare that with Edwin Sifuna. Sifuna speaks directly. He rarely avoids confrontation. His speeches are structured around issues that resonate strongly with many opposition supporters. Cost of living, government accountability, corruption, youth frustration. He also communicates in language many younger voters easily relate to. That makes him highly visible. Visibility builds influence. Influence builds bargaining power. Even if Sifuna never contests the presidency himself, his growing popularity strengthens the Linda Mwananchi team during coalition negotiations. Their voice becomes harder to ignore. Strategic analysis of the main political actors. For Sifuna, the strategy appears straightforward. Continue strengthening his national profile. Become indispensable inside the opposition. Expand influence beyond Nairobi and ODM's traditional strongholds. For Kalonzo, the challenge is different. He must convince coalition partners that he remains the strongest candidate capable of defeating President William Ruto if he seeks the coalition's presidential ticket. That requires more than seniority. It requires demonstrating public enthusiasm. For the rest of the opposition leadership, this creates a delicate balancing act. They want unity, but they also want the strongest possible candidate. Those two goals do not always point in the same direction. Several scenarios remain possible. One possibility is that Kalonzo successfully rebuilds momentum and secures the coalition's backing through negotiations and broader national outreach. Another possibility is that growing public enthusiasm around younger opposition leaders shifts internal power, forcing coalition leaders to rethink their presidential calculations. A third possibility is that the coalition settles on a compromise arrangement that preserves unity while accommodating competing ambitions. At this stage, none of these outcomes is certain. Much will depend on public opinion, coalition negotiations, campaign organization, and how events unfold before the election. It would be inaccurate to declare Kalonzo Musyoka's presidential ambitions finished. Kenyan politics has repeatedly shown that political fortunes can change quickly. However, it would also be difficult to ignore what appears to be happening inside today's opposition. Momentum is becoming one of the coalition's most valuable political assets. And at this moment, much of that momentum appears to surround Edwin Sifuna and the Linda Mwananchi team. Whether that ultimately benefits Kalonzo, sidelines him, or reshapes the opposition's leadership altogether remains an open question. Perhaps the biggest question is this. If the opposition eventually has to choose between experience and momentum, which one will matter more to Kenyan voters in 2027?